A brilliant black entrepreneur, David Parker, arrives at a high-stakes investor meeting only to be mistaken for an assistant and thrown out. What follows is a storm of betrayal, media scandal, and corporate manipulation as David fights to reclaim his dignity and the company he secretly built. With the world watching, he unveils a revolutionary AI that challenges prejudice, exposes corruption, and forces powerful rivals to face the truth. Through tension, strategy, and quiet revenge, David turns humiliation into power, proving that vision, resilience, and integrity can outshine every bias stacked against him. The marble floors of Langston Tower reflected the morning sun like glass. Inside, the grand boardroom was buzzing. Investors, analysts, and executives were gathering for one of the most important meetings of the year. They were here to decide the future of Novatech Industries, a rising tech empire rumored to be merging with a global conglomerate. At 8:57 a.m., a man stepped out of the elevator wearing a charcoal grey suit, not designer, not flashy, but clean and confident. He carried no briefcase, no assistant, no entourage. His name was David Parker. He took a slow breath, gazing up at the glass walls of the 40th floor. This building was his vision, his creation, though few in this room knew that. Years ago, Novatech was nothing but a dream in his tiny apartment, built from nights of code, broken partnerships, and hard-earned scars. But today, the company was worth billions. He was its founder, its leader, and its unseen owner. David had chosen to attend today's meeting without announcement. He wanted to see his investors and board members for who they truly were, not how they behaved when the CEO title was on display. When he entered the boardroom, the air shifted slightly. Conversations paused. Heads turned. "Excuse me," said Emily Harris, an investor in her mid-40s with an immaculate blazer and sharper tone. "Can we help you?" David gave a polite nod. "Yes. I'm here for the Novatech board meeting." Emily blinked, exchanging a puzzled look with Ryan Adams, the young analyst seated near her. "Oh, you must be from the catering staff," she said lightly. "The refreshments are being set up in the lounge next door." Ryan chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, we'll need the coffee ready soon." David's eyes flicked toward them, calm but unreadable. "I'm not with catering. I have a seat at this table." From the far end, John Miller, the silver-haired board chairman, looked up from his tablet. His voice was commanding, the kind that came from decades of unchecked authority. "I don't recall authorizing a guest," he said. "Name?" "David Parker." The room fell into a brief, strange silence. Emily frowned. "David Parker? As in the consultant from—" "No," David interrupted smoothly. "Not a consultant. I helped build Novatech." A small laugh came from the corner. "Well, congratulations," John said dryly. "But this is a private meeting. Unless your name's on the list, you can take it up with security." David's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed composed. "You might want to double-check that list." Ryan smirked. "Look, man, no offense, but this room's for senior executives and investors only. You can't just walk in here claiming you built the company." Emily folded her arms. "Security." Two guards appeared almost instantly, large men in black suits, earpieces glowing under the ceiling lights. One of them stepped forward. "Sir, we'll have to ask you to leave." David's expression didn't change. He simply reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, carefully, and produced a sleek black access card embossed with a golden emblem, Novatech founder's seal. Emily scoffed. "Anyone could print that." The guard hesitated, glancing at John Miller, who gave a small nod. "Escort him out." The hands on David's shoulders were firm but not rough. The entire boardroom watched in silence, some curious, some amused, a few uncomfortable. As the elevator doors closed in front of him, David stared at his reflection in the metal panel, calm, centered. Lisa's voice echoed in his mind. "Are you sure you want to go in unannounced, David? They won't recognize you." "That's the point," he had replied. He smiled faintly. "Let's see how they treat people when no titles are attached." Back upstairs, the meeting continued without him. "All right," John said, clearing his throat. "Now that distractions are handled, let's discuss the merger terms with Apex Dynamics." Ryan projected a chart on the screen. Their offer values Novatech at roughly $2.8 billion. They want full operational control but will retain minority equity options for the founder, though, to my understanding, he's not involved in active management anymore. Emily adjusted her glasses. "Frankly, We don't even know who the original founder is. The name's never been public. Just some private equity shell that holds majority shares." John chuckled. "Exactly. Which makes this deal easier. No emotional attachments, no founders trying to cling to power." At that moment, the boardroom door swung open. Everyone turned. Lisa Brown stood there, breath slightly short, phone in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, voice steady but sharp. "But I think you all made a mistake." John frowned. "Lisa, we're in the middle of something." She ignored him, stepping forward. "The man you just had escorted out, that was Mr. David Parker." Emily sighed. "Yes, we gathered that much." Lisa placed a folder on the table with a crisp snap. "Then maybe you should also know he's the majority shareholder of Novatech Industries. The founder. And your current chief executive officer." The room went dead silent. Ryan's eyes widened. "What?" John sat back slowly, disbelief painted across his face. "That's not possible. The founder's name isn't public record." Lisa tilted her head. "No, it's not. By design. Mr. Parker believed the company's vision should speak louder than his name. Until today." Emily's voice faltered. "You're saying the man we just kicked out owns 51% of Novatech," Lisa finished. For a few heartbeats, no one spoke. Then John straightened, anger and panic flickering in his tone. "Get him back here. Now." Downstairs, David stood in the lobby, scrolling through his phone. He wasn't surprised when the security guard's earpiece crackled and the man stiffened. "Sir," the guard said, voice suddenly respectful, "Mr. Miller is asking you to return." David smiled faintly, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Tell Mr. Miller I'll be there in a moment." When the elevator doors opened again, every person in the boardroom rose to their feet. Some out of respect, some out of guilt. David walked in quietly, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Emily's voice trembled. "Mr. Parker, we didn't realize." "That's exactly the problem," David said softly, taking his seat, the head of the table. His eyes swept across the room. "You saw a man you didn't recognize, so you assumed he didn't belong." John shifted uneasily. "This was a misunderstanding." David leaned forward slightly. "No. It was a reflection." The tension in the room thickened like fog. He didn't raise his voice, yet every word landed like a strike. He rested his hands on the table, calm but commanding. "Now," he said, his gaze steady. "Let's begin the meeting." The silence after David Parker's words felt heavy enough to crush glass. Nobody dared speak first. The man they had mocked minutes ago now sat calmly at the head of the table, the true CEO of Novatech Industries. David adjusted his watch, the same simple one he'd worn since his startup days. Then he looked at the stunned faces around him and gave a small, professional smile. "Now that we've cleared up who belongs in this room," he said evenly, "let's continue." Ryan Adams fidgeted with his pen. Emily Harris swallowed hard, pretending to check her notes. John Miller, the board chairman, forced a chuckle that fooled no one. "Well, David," John said, leaning back, "we're thrilled to have you here. Of course, there was some confusion, but no harm done." David's eyes flicked toward him. Confusion is forgivable. Assumptions, however, reveal something deeper. A nervous cough came from the far end of the table. Lisa Brown, standing near the projector, caught David's eye. He gave her a subtle nod. She understood. Continue the agenda, but don't soften the truth. Lisa clicked the remote, and the merger proposal appeared on the large screen. "As you can see," she said, her voice steady, "Apex Dynamics has offered a full acquisition of Novatech for $2.8 billion. They plan to replace executive leadership post-merger." David leaned back, crossing his arms. "Replace executive leadership," he repeated. "So, they plan to remove me." John cleared his throat again. "Well, technically, yes. Apex wants a fresh direction. But you'd still receive a founder's compensation package. A very comfortable one." David tilted his head. "And who approved presenting this offer to Apex in the first place?" Emily hesitated. "The board did." "The board," David said slowly, "that didn't even recognize its own CEO." The sting of his words made Ryan lower his gaze. "Mr. Parker," Emily began cautiously, "we didn't know your identity was confidential. You chose to keep it hidden. Surely you can understand." David cut her off gently. What I understand, Ms. Harris, is that leadership isn't about who has the flashiest suit or the lightest skin tone. It's about vision. And while you were selling Novatech's soul to Apex, I was building the next generation of our product line, in silence. Lisa tapped a few keys on her laptop. The projector changed slides to a black screen that slowly lit up with glowing data, Project Orion. Gasps rippled across the room. Ryan squinted. What's this? David's tone turned electric. Orion is Novatech's newest AI engine, capable of adaptive reasoning and emotional modeling. It's 3 years ahead of anything Apex Dynamics has. And it's ours. Emily's jaw dropped. But we didn't know that existed. That's because I didn't trust the board, David said calmly. I've been developing it with a private team off-site. Fully patented, fully protected. John's voice shook slightly. David, this kind of secrecy. Save this company, David interrupted, eyes sharp. While the board debated short-term profits, I was ensuring our survival. The room went silent again. The dynamic had completely shifted. Every gaze that once dismissed him now held fear or admiration. David stood, pacing slowly around the table. You see, I started Novatech with nothing but an idea and a rented desk. I built it while people like you laughed at the thought of a man like me leading a tech empire. And yet, here we are, billions in valuation, global reach, and now, a product that could redefine artificial intelligence. Ryan finally spoke. Sir, if what you're saying is true, Apex's offer is insulting. Orion alone could double the company's value. David stopped walking and turned toward him. Now you're thinking like a leader. Emily clasped her hands tightly. Mr. Parker, I owe you an apology. He raised a hand. Don't apologize to me, Ms. Harris. Learn from it. John exhaled through his nose, frustration simmering beneath the surface. All right, he said, his voice lower now. You've made your point. You're the CEO. You've got some secret project that could change everything. But this isn't how companies are run. We need transparency, control, governance. David smirked slightly. Governance is what destroyed creativity. I built Novatech by trusting people, not strangling them with procedure. John's tone hardened. And where does that leave us, then? David stopped pacing, returning to his seat. It leaves us with a choice, he said quietly. You can continue supporting Novatech's independent future, or you can tender your resignations before I review the board structure. Emily's eyes widened. You can't just fire the board. I don't have to, David said, opening his tablet. I own 51% of Novatech. My vote determines the board composition. And as of this morning, I've already filed for an emergency restructuring. John's face turned pale. You planned this? David's smile was almost kind. You planned to sell my company behind my back. I simply planned further ahead. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. The power balance had completely reversed. Lisa handed David a document. The legal papers for the restructuring are ready, she said quietly. David nodded and signed them with a single stroke. The room felt like it exhaled. But just as the tension began to settle, the door opened again, and Michael Reed, the journalist, walked in with a camera crew. Apologies for the intrusion, he said, his tone polite but probing. I was invited to document today's investor meeting. Didn't expect it to be this eventful. Emily looked horrified. This isn't public. Michael smiled faintly. It's about to be. David didn't stop him. Instead, he looked directly into the camera. You can record this, he said. The world deserves to see what happens when prejudice meets truth. John slammed a hand on the table. David, this is outrageous. You're exposing internal affairs. David's eyes flashed. No, John. I'm exposing reality. The cameras rolled. He leaned forward, his tone steady but powerful. For years, I let others speak for Novatech. I hid behind corporate anonymity because I believed my work would speak louder than my appearance. But today reminded me that silence protects no one. So let me speak clearly. I am David Parker, founder and CEO of Novatech Industries. And this company will no longer be led by fear, bias, or greed. The words hit like thunder. Even John, furious and red-faced, couldn't find a reply. The investors were frozen, caught between guilt and awe. David stood, closing his tablet. "Meeting adjourned," he said calmly. "And for those who wish to continue with integrity, you know where to find me." He turned and walked out, leaving the boardroom stunned and silent. As the elevator doors closed behind him once more, Michael Reed followed, recorder in hand. "Mr. Parker," he said softly, "that was powerful. Do you realize this will be everywhere by tonight?" David looked ahead, calm but resolute. "Good," he said. "Let them see what real leadership looks like." By noon, the world already knew. Every major news outlet had replayed the clip at least a dozen times. Black CEO kicked out of his own meeting. Turns out, he owns the company. The footage showed David Parker's calm, collected expression as he sat at the head of the boardroom table, confronting the very people who had thrown him out just minutes earlier. His words, firm, measured, and laced with quiet power, had gone viral. Outside Langston Tower, a crowd gathered. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The glass facade of Novatech now reflected chaos. Lisa Brown stood near the window in David's office, scrolling through headlines. "They're calling you the silent founder," she said with a small laugh. "Some are even comparing you to Elon Musk and Robert Smith." David, seated at his desk, didn't look up from his laptop. "They'll call me a dozen names before the day ends. What matters is what we do next." Lisa nodded. "The board's in panic mode. I've had calls from Emily Harris and Ryan Adams already. John Miller hasn't stopped emailing since morning." David finally looked up, eyes calm. "Good. Let them stew." At that moment, the office door opened. Ryan Adams walked in, looking uneasy, tie loosened, a folder clutched in his hand. "Mr. Parker," he said quickly, "thank you for seeing me. I owe you an apology." David gestured for him to sit. "You were the one who laughed the least, Ryan. I remember." Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sir, I didn't stand up for you either. I should have. I didn't realize." David cut him off gently. "You realized enough. You just didn't want to be the one to risk your comfort." Ryan swallowed hard. "You're right." He placed the folder on the desk. "I brought something I think you'll want to see. The Apex merger proposal. I found internal memos, private communications between Apex and John Miller." David's brows lifted slightly. "Private communications?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, sir. It looks like the merger wasn't just about selling the company. John was negotiating a personal payout, $10 million in consulting fees if the merger went through." Lisa's eyes widened. "He was selling you out." David leaned back, expression unreadable. "Of course he was." He opened the folder and scanned the documents. The evidence was damning: signatures, timestamps, even encrypted emails. John Miller had planned everything. The board had been his cover. David smiled faintly. "So, that's his game." Ryan leaned forward. "Sir, if this gets out, Apex's credibility will tank. We could file a lawsuit, maybe even force a full investigation." David closed the folder and stood. "No," he said quietly. "Let's not expose it yet. Not until I've spoken to John myself." Lisa frowned. "You're going to confront him?" David nodded. "Face to face." By afternoon, the boardroom was nearly empty, save for John Miller pacing near the window. His phone buzzed non-stop, and his face was drenched in tension. When the door opened, he turned sharply. David entered, hands in his pockets, composed as ever. "John," he said softly, "busy day." John glared. "You've turned this company into a circus, David." Reporters outside, shareholders panicking. "Shareholders are fine," David interrupted. "Their stock is up 12% since morning. Apparently, authenticity sells." John's jaw tightened. "You made me look like a fool on live television." David gave a slight shrug. "You did that yourself. I simply walked into my own meeting." John slammed his palm on the table. "You think you can humiliate people and still lead them? This company needs control, not chaos." David stepped closer. "Control? You mean the control you tried to sell to Apex?" John froze. David's voice stayed calm. "I know about the $10 million payout. The consulting fee. The secret meetings. The private messages. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed Novatech." John's face turned red. "You have no proof." David dropped the folder on the table. I have more than proof. I have options. You can resign quietly, or you can explain to a federal investigator why Apex Dynamics paid you to undermine your own company. John's shoulders sank. You wouldn't. I would, David said coldly. Because men like you have gotten away with this for decades. But not this time. John's voice cracked slightly. You're making a mistake. You'll divide the company. David's tone softened, not out of mercy, but conviction. The company was already divided. I'm just rebuilding it honestly. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. You have 24 hours to decide, John. After that, I go public. The door closed quietly behind him. John slumped into a chair, the weight of his downfall sinking in. That evening, David stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the city. The sunset bled into streaks of orange and violet, reflecting off the skyline. Lisa joined him with 2 cups of coffee. You did it, she said quietly. You turned their humiliation into power. David smiled faintly. Not power. Clarity. She looked at him curiously. What do you mean? Sometimes people see you only after they've tried to erase you, he said. Now they can't unsee me. Lisa nodded slowly. What about John? David took a sip of coffee. He'll resign by morning. If not, the truth goes out. Lisa's phone buzzed. She checked it, her eyes widened. You might want to see this. On her screen was a breaking news alert. Apex Dynamics denies merger negotiations amid insider trading allegations. David frowned. That was fast. Lisa scrolled down. Someone leaked the documents. David looked at her sharply. It wasn't you. She shook her head. No, sir. Then realization dawned. Ryan. David turned toward the city lights, his mind spinning. He leaked it, he murmured. Why? Lisa hesitated. Maybe he thought he was helping. David's jaw set. Or maybe he's working with Apex. They needed a scapegoat. The tension returned, heavy and thick. David's calm exterior masked the storm brewing inside. Someone had moved faster than him. He stared out at the city, once bright with promise, now a chessboard of betrayal. In the reflection of the glass, his expression hardened. They wanted a story, he whispered. Let's give them one. The next morning, Novatech stock plunged 15%. News outlets speculated about corporate fraud, whistleblowers, and leadership battles. The board called an emergency session. But David Parker wasn't there. He was already one step ahead, preparing something bigger, something that would not just save Novatech, but redefine its legacy forever. As the chaos unfolded upstairs, David met privately with a small team of engineers, investors, and lawyers in a secret lab outside the city, the same team that built Project Orion. He looked around the room. Everyone here believes in what we started, he said quietly. But to protect Novatech's vision, we might have to destroy what it's become. One of the engineers frowned. Sir, what are you planning? David's eyes gleamed. A public demonstration. Something Apex can't buy, and the world can't ignore. Lisa, standing beside him, whispered, You're going to reveal Orion, aren't you? David smiled. Not just reveal it. He turned toward the glowing console in the center of the lab, where the Ares core interface shimmered with light. I'm going to let it speak. The underground lab buzzed with quiet intensity. Screens flickered in the dim light, casting shifting reflections across glass walls. Engineers moved like ghosts, their faces illuminated by the pale blue glow of Orion's core. David Parker stood in the center, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the interface. The AI system, a creation of his secret team, was pulsing with soft rhythm, almost alive. Status, he asked. One of the engineers, Aisha Patel, glanced up from her console. Orion's stable. Speech integration is live. We've calibrated it for the public demo. Lisa Brown hovered near the control table, her face tense. You're sure we should do this live? After everything that's happened, the world's watching your every move. David turned to her. That's exactly why we do it live. They've seen scandal, betrayal, and lies. It's time they see truth, and innovation. He walked toward the center platform, where a holographic projection of a human silhouette flickered. It was Orion's visual presence, designed to be neutral, neither male nor female, a symbol of inclusivity. The lab doors opened, and Ryan Adams stepped in hesitantly. His face was pale, eyes darting nervously. David didn't look surprised. "I was expecting you." Ryan swallowed. "I didn't mean for the leak to happen that way, Mr. Parker. I thought it would stop Apex from pressuring the board. I didn't realize that Apex would spin it against us." David finished. Ryan nodded, shame clouding his face. "Yes. They made it look like Novatek's in chaos. Investors are panicking." Lisa's arms were crossed. "You handed them exactly what they wanted." "I know," Ryan said softly. "But I want to make it right. I'll help you with the demonstration." David studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then you'll be the one to introduce it. The world needs to see that even those who made mistakes can change sides." Ryan blinked in disbelief. "You'd still trust me?" David's expression softened slightly. "I don't trust you yet. But I believe in redemption." Hours later, Novatek's auditorium filled with hundreds of journalists, analysts, and cameras. The company's logo glowed across a massive LED screen, with the tagline, "The future thinks different." Outside, thousands more watched on live streams. The scandal had turned Novatek's presentation into a global spectacle. Everyone wanted to see what David Parker would do next. Backstage, Lisa checked the MIC levels while David adjusted his jacket. His composure was unshaken, but inside, his mind raced. He knew Apex Dynamics would be watching, waiting for him to fail. 5 minutes, a technician called out. David took a slow breath. "Let's make history." Ryan stepped out first, greeted by murmurs from the crowd. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke into the MIC. "Good afternoon, everyone. I know many of you have questions about Novatek, about leadership, direction, and truth. But today, we're not here to defend the past. We're here to show the future." He stepped aside. "Please welcome the founder and CEO of Novatek Industries, Mr. David Parker." The crowd erupted in applause and flashes. David walked to the podium, posture straight, eyes steady. He waited for the noise to fade before speaking. "Thank you," he began. "The past few days have reminded me of one truth. Leadership isn't about who sits at the table. It's about who builds it." The crowd grew quiet. He continued, "When I started Novatek, I wanted to create technology that thinks with humanity, not above it. And that's what we've done." He gestured toward the massive screen. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Orion." The lights dimmed. The screen flickered, and the holographic silhouette appeared, hovering above the stage, glowing like a living being made of light. Then, a voice, calm, intelligent, genderless, filled the room. "Good afternoon. I am Orion. I learn not just from data, but from emotion, empathy, and experience. I do not replace humanity, I understand it." Gasps rippled through the audience. David smiled faintly. Orion can analyze emotion in real time, adapt to tone, and reason like a human without bias. It's the first AI designed to feel responsibly. The hologram turned its gaze toward David. "Would you like me to demonstrate, Mr. Parker?" "Please," David said. Orion scanned the audience with a soft hum. "The woman in the third row, your heartbeat has increased. You're anxious. Are you worried about your investment in Novatek?" The woman froze, startled. Yes. "Do not worry," Orion said gently. "I calculate a 74% probability of Novatek's valuation doubling within 18 months based on current R&D and market momentum." The audience burst into laughter and applause. The demonstration continued for 10 minutes. Orion predicted trends, simulated empathy, even composed a brief poem when prompted. By the end, the room was silent with awe. David stepped forward again. "This is not just software. It's a mirror for humanity. And no merger, no scandal, no bias can stop what comes next." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, live stream chats exploded with excitement. But as David turned to leave the stage, Lisa's voice buzzed urgently in his earpiece. "David, we've got a problem." He froze. "What kind of problem?" "Apex Dynamics just filed a lawsuit," she said, voice tense. "They're claiming Orion's code belongs to them, stolen proprietary data. They say they have proof." David's jaw tightened. "That's impossible." "Maybe not," Lisa whispered. "Ryan's laptop, it was connected to the mainframe yesterday." David's heart sank. He glanced toward Ryan, who was smiling nervously for cameras, basking in the crowd's reaction. Then he saw it, the way Ryan's phone buzzed, his quick glance toward the balcony, the shadow of a man in a grey suit watching them from above. Apex's representative. David's pulse quickened. The room that had just been full of applause now felt like a trap. He turned his Mac off and murmured to Lisa, "Lock the servers. Cut external access." Lisa moved fast, tapping on her tablet. "Already on it." Ryan walked toward David, still smiling. "Incredible, right? The crowd loves it." David's eyes were cold. Who gave Apex access to Orion's architecture? Ryan's face paled. I didn't." Before he could finish, Lisa held up her tablet. Too late. They just uploaded a public statement, claiming they co-developed Orion under an undisclosed partnership. David exhaled slowly, fury hidden beneath calm. The lights from the stage cast sharp lines across his face. "Then we'll show them the truth," he said quietly. "If Apex wants a war, they'll get one." Ryan's voice trembled. "Sir, what are you going to do?" David turned toward the glowing hologram. "Orion," he said, "show the world your origin logs." The eye's tone was serene. "Accessing creation records. Displaying visual timeline." The giant screen lit up with thousands of entries, video clips, signatures, timestamps, all verifying one truth: every line of Orion's code had been developed under Novatech's roof. The final entry appeared: project initiated by David Parker, 100% proprietary rights. The audience gasped again. Reporters rushed to capture the footage. David looked up at the balcony where Apex's representative was standing, now pale and speechless. He smiled faintly. "Consider that my statement." The room erupted again, this time, not in applause, but in thunderous vindication. That night, as news outlets replayed the event across the world, headlines shifted from scandal to triumph. David Parker outsmarts Apex in live broadcast. Novatech's Orion shatters industry limits. But David knew it wasn't over. Apex wouldn't back down easily, and the final confrontation was still coming. He stood by the window of his dark office, city lights glowing below. Lisa approached quietly. "You did it," she said. David shook his head. "Not yet. They tried to steal my company once. Next time, they'll try to destroy me." His gaze hardened, reflecting in the glass. "Let them try." The rain came down hard that night. Thunder rolled over the city skyline, and lightning streaked against the glass facade of Novatech Tower. Inside, the boardroom lights burned low, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. David Parker sat alone at the head of the table, reviewing documents on his tablet, legal notices, investor letters, media coverage. Every screen flashed his name. David Parker declares war on Apex. The man they kicked out now controls the market. Novatech AI sparks revolution. He should have felt triumphant. But victory, he knew, came at a cost. Lisa entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You haven't slept in 2 days," she said softly. David smiled faintly. "Neither has Apex." She sat across from him. "Their stock's collapsing. The public sided with you after the Orion broadcast. You've won, David. You don't have to keep fighting." He looked out the window, rain tracing streaks on the glass. "They accused me of stealing my own dream. They questioned my right to lead what I built. That wasn't business, that was personal." Lisa hesitated. "Then finish it. But don't let it destroy you." Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Parker," said a familiar voice, calm, arrogant, smug. "It's Howard Denton, Apex's chairman." David's jaw tightened. "I was wondering when you'd crawl out of the shadows." Howard chuckled. "Let's not be dramatic. I didn't crawl, I strategized. You embarrassed my company on a global stage. I can't let that stand." David leaned back, his tone icy. "You tried to destroy my reputation, steal my code, and humiliate me in my own industry. What's next, Howard?" "I'm offering you a deal," Denton said. "Sell Novatech to Apex. You'll keep your title, your wealth, and we'll control the future together." David's laugh was low and disbelieving. "You kicked me out of a meeting because I didn't look like a CEO. Now you're begging for partnership. Business isn't personal, Parker. It's survival. Take the deal before I make you regret it." David's voice went cold. You already tried. Then he hung up. The next morning, the Novatech board gathered for an emergency meeting. Investors filled the room, tension humming like static. John Miller, the board chairman who once had David thrown out, looked uneasy. David, before we begin, I want to say. David raised a hand. Save it. You didn't believe in me when it mattered. But today, you'll understand why you should have. He connected his laptop to the main screen. This, he said, is Orion's latest update. The hologram appeared once more, but this time, its tone carried weight, sharper, more human. Good morning, it said. I have analyzed Apex Dynamics operations. Would you like me to share my findings? Gasps rippled through the room. John stammered, You mean? David nodded. Yes. Apex's entire empire runs on stolen intellectual property, much of it derived from early Novatech prototypes. I've compiled the proof. The screen filled with documents, time-stamped emails, source code fragments, patent comparisons. Orion spoke over the data. These files were hidden under encrypted Apex servers, recovered legally through public access channels. The room fell silent. Emily Harris, once David's harshest critic, whispered, You just exposed one of the biggest tech frauds in the country. David turned to her, eyes calm. Correction, we did. Novatech stands for integrity. Something Apex forgot. Within hours, the revelation hit the media. Apex Dynamics under investigation for intellectual theft. David Parker vindicated again. Novatech stock skyrockets after scandal. But behind the headlines, Howard Denton's empire began to crumble. His investors fled. His reputation disintegrated. 2 days later, David received a message from his lawyer, Apex files for bankruptcy. Denton resigns. He read it in silence, then looked up at Lisa. It's over, she said softly. David nodded, but his expression was distant. No. It's just beginning. He stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the skyline. For years, people like me had to prove twice as hard just to be seen as equal. They judged the color of my skin before the power of my vision. That ends today. Lisa smiled. You've already changed the game. He turned to her, finally allowing himself a real smile. Then let's build something bigger. A week later, Novatech hosted a global summit. World leaders, CEOs, and innovators filled the arena. Reporters from every major network gathered as David took the stage one last time. He spoke not with bitterness, but with pride. When I walked into that first meeting, he said, they saw a man who didn't belong. But belonging isn't given, it's earned. I was thrown out of a room I built because prejudice still blinds those who fear change. He paused, scanning the audience. But here's the truth, genius doesn't have a color. Leadership doesn't have a face. Power doesn't need permission. Applause thundered through the hall. David continued, voice steady and resolute. Orion was never just an AI project. It was proof that empathy and intelligence can coexist, in machines, and in us. The future belongs to those who build bridges, not walls. The audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Lisa stood by the stage, clapping with tears in her eyes. Among the crowd, Ryan Adams watched quietly, guilt still lingering, but replaced by admiration. Howard Denton was nowhere to be seen. Later that night, David returned to his office. The city lights shimmered outside as he poured himself a glass of water and stared at the framed photo on his desk, his mother, smiling proudly at his college graduation. He whispered, We did it, Mom. Then, as he turned to leave, Orion's voice echoed gently from the speakers. Mr. Parker, it said, what will you do now that you've won? David smiled. I'll keep building. Not for revenge, for the ones who'll come after me. Orion paused. Would you like me to record that as your final note for this chapter? David nodded. Yes. Title it Belonging. The eye's voice softened. Done. He switched off the lights and walked out, the glow of Novatech Tower cutting through the darkness, a symbol of what happens when vision outlasts bias and integrity triumphs over arrogance. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear, and for the first time in years, David Parker allowed himself to breathe, not as the man who was kicked out of a room, but as the man who owned it.